Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this young lady on. It is late now in Italy where she lives. It's Bree Dale. She's a correspondent, the Rome correspondent for the Daily Wire. Bree, how are you? Good to see you.
Good evening from Rome. Great to meet you finally face to face, Joe.
Yeah, we've been talking to each other. We've been friends for a long time on social media, on X, and it is nice to see you. I've heard you, and of course I've seen you because of your great reports, but I hear you in these spaces, and you do a great job in there. I just have to ask you, I'm sure you still have people here in the United States. If you know our perspective here, how different can the perspective be when you're in Italy, knowing that the Middle East is so much closer to you?
Well, it's a great question. The Italians are very aware of the situation, and historically, because if you take a look at the the Roman Empire has been very involved in the Middle East, and we've seen how the results of that have meant the reshaping of the Western world. And so the Italians are very aware. They are also very concerned about the open border, so much so that they voted in one of the most, what you could consider, far right candidates into becoming the prime minister, Giorgia Meloni. And sadly, it does seem that they are quite disappointed so far with Giorgia Meloni's kind of backtracking on her platform, which was originally very hard-lined in the case of against the EU pressure on Italy to take undocumented migrants into the country. So this is certainly something that they are aware of, and of course the Italians are very good allies to the United States.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the carrier strike groups prior to moving over towards Israel were working on joint operations with the Italian Navy. Joe.
You know, it's a very interesting perspective because I know the pride that Italians have in Italy. I'm Italian. You might be able to tell by Pagliarulo is my last name. And I've been there and just a very prideful people, and that's awesome. We don't ever have a problem. By we, I mean Italians, Americans, the Western society doesn't have a problem helping people out, provided they want to acclimate and they want to become part of this culture now that they're joining. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing multiculturalism fail on a massive level. And to that point, Lampedusa recently, I did a video that went, a couple of million views because people couldn't believe the boatloads of people coming from Africa straight to Italy, and Italy somehow accepting them with a prime minister, as you said, in Giorgia Meloni, that basically ran on the fact that I love Italy, national pride for Italy, and we're not going to accept a bunch of people coming here illegally because they just want to show up on the shores. So what made that change? Is there something that made her change that she had to go against what she campaigned on?
Right. Well, of course, the EU has a lot of pressure on Italy, especially because COVID-19 brought with it a real pressure on their economic situation. Italians in throughout Italy are very much dependent on the tourist industry and also the wine industry,
Right.
and of course that went a nosedive when COVID hit, and so the Italians took money from the EU to help subsidize, and with that came pressures within the EU in the 2030 project. But I think there's also something to be said as well. You mentioned that the Italians are very open in bringing in people. Italians are very open. In fact, they're very much involved with NGO and humanitarian aid throughout the world. They're very physically involved with it. And in fact, FAO, the food organization associated with the UN, it has one of its main headquarters in Rome, and so yeah, the Italians are very much involved in social work. However, what we've seen here is a crossover and a manipulation of that, that drive to want to help outside the Italian borders and into this idea of open borders. And Joe, one other thing that I think people are not aware of, Matteo Salvini, who was kind of pegged as the Trump of Italy
Okay.
during his time as the internal, he was in charge of internal affairs within in Italy. He was his main job when he was in charge was also focusing on the ports and the borders, and he closed the ports to these NGO ships that many of them are German that are picking up Africans, people from North Africa, Middle East, undocumented, who have been in dhows trying to get to Italy and bringing them to Italy. He closed the ports to them and, in fact, is facing charges now of kidnapping. He is in court for that right now,
Wow.
for doing his job.
I was talking to somebody recently, Simona Mangiante Papadopoulos, who is from Italy. She and I are friends. I had her on the show. She said that at one point, either Giorgia Meloni or somebody else, and maybe you can correct me if I get this wrong, was talking about destroying these boats that are being used from Africa to come here. This may be the same story that you're talking about, but
That's
said,
Matteo.
well, she said that they were actually bought and paid for by George Soros. Is that true?
Well, it would not be surprising that Soros and others who push this type of thing would be involved with that. In fact, I think in the court case with Matteo Salvini,
Okay.
a famous Hollywood actor has been called to testify against him. So yeah, it's very much kangaroo court in Italy with regards to this. And again, Matteo Salvini, even though you might be on the left and consider him hardline, he was doing his job and protecting his ports. So.
As well he should. It's so weird that the Western world can't do it. By the way, it's Bree A. Dale. Bree Dale, D-A-I-L is her last name. First is B-R-E-E. Go to breeadale.substack.com. That's the whole thing. You do have the A in there, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, breeadale.substack.com. Follow her on all the social media as well. She is based in Rome and has great insight from there. What I don't understand is yesterday, King Abdullah can come out of Jordan. And he can say, not one refugee. We're not taking any. Egypt's not taking any. Egypt and Jordan didn't want the Palestinians back in the day. That's why Israel was controlling the land. Land for peace was supposed to be the deal in 2005. That wasn't true. But why is it, from the Italian perspective, if you don't mind, Bree, why is it that he can say, and Egypt can say, and fill in the blank other Middle Eastern country can say, we're not taking any of them? But for some reason, Italy has to, or the United States has to. Biden's now talking about bringing some Palestinians here. Why is that?
Right. Again, it's the emotional draw and seeing the civilians in Gaza being manipulated by Hamas. I think a lot of people don't realize that the Palestinians in Gaza did elect their government, and their government is a terrorist organization, Hamas.
Right.
It is worldwide recognized terrorist organization. And so, yes, there are civilians. In case we discussed in one of our spaces, the Cardinal, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Cardinal Pizaballa, he said that there is about a little less than 1,000 Christians in Gaza. And we do know that the Palestinian Arabs, who really, the Christians who've had their roots since the time Jesus walked on the earth, I mean, that's how old this church is.
Right.
Those who have families in Hamas-controlled areas, such as in Nazareth, have been losing their homes. They've been kicked out of their homes by the Palestinian Arabs who are engaged with, who are Muslim and who are engaged with Hamas. So Christians are caught in the middle and civilians are caught in the middle. But when you elect a terrorist organization and they commit atrocities in a sovereign nation, you can't just expect that there's not going to be a response.
Coming to us from Italy, it's Bree Dale. She's a great reporter, a Rome correspondent for the Daily Wire. Again, breeadale.substack.com. Go there and follow her there. Let me ask you about, just briefly, on the history. I know the Roman Empire owned that land. I know the Ottoman Empire owned that land. I know that the British Empire owned that land. In fact, I think it was only called Palestine, a territory in the British Empire. It's never been a country. There was never a country called Palestine. There was a Philistine, biblically, but I don't even think that's the same people. I think we're dealing with Egyptians and Jordanians here in modern-day Gaza. Why is it that people like Rashida Tlaib here and others around the globe are now marching in support of Hamas, in support of what would be Palestine, when it's literally never existed? It's had a chance to exist. When Bill Clinton offered them 97% of what they wanted, they said
Right.
no. Every time there's a two-state solution, they always say no. How can so many millions of people, Bree, help me understand, be so wrong about the history of that one little sliver of land?
Right. So first off, the Emperor Hadrian, when Hadrian went in and really conquered Jerusalem after the uprising, the Jewish uprising, we could see that actually when you come to Rome, Hadrian's column has this where they're marching away with the candelabra, the menorah of
Right.
the temple. When you see that and he conquered that, he was the one to kind of create the term Palestina. So that idea of Palestine, it was never a state. It was just a region that he renamed it in order to kind of disperse the Jews throughout the world, which he did after the uprising. So I think that is where I think a lot of people kind of cling to say that, oh well, the land was vacated and we were the ones who were left. However, that's not enough. History shows that Israel was always recognized as Israel. We see it in scripture, and it's definitely recognized by all three religions.
And it was always right there. That's not
Right.
a
It
new
was always
place. It
right
was
there.
always geographically there.
Right, right. And so I think where you start to see the manipulation by certain politicians of the narrative of some kind of state. And in fact, I would say even here in the Vatican, I cover the Vatican extensively. The Secretary of State just the other day went to visit the quote embassy of Palestine, where he discussed his and Pope Francis as he spoke about Pope Francis's real concern for those who have been taken by Hamas, the hostages, and condemned that, and he also condemned the continued war. But he said that he was hoping that there would be a resolution from the government of the state of Palestine. And I did have to respond to the Secretary of State and said, how do you recognize a state that does not historically or internationally recognize as existing? And how do you again dialogue with Hamas, whose own tenets say not only the destruction of Israel, but they want to kill the Jews. They want to eradicate the Jews. This is internationally worldwide.
Right.
So it's very difficult for a logical, reasonable person to really come to grasp on some of these politicians. And also, Joe, what's really interesting is the history. You mentioned Arafat walking away from the two-party or the two-state system. Arafat was the nephew of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. And the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, the last one, was in bed with the Nazis. This is historical. This is documented. He met many times with Hitler. He collaborated with Himmler. And he was the one, he actually visited death camps and encouraged the Nazis on their final solution. He wanted the eradication of the Jews to go faster, Joe. So, this is documented. This is, I put
Yeah, but
it
you
on my
realize you're not
social
allowed to
media.
report that, right? You're not allowed to report that because the Palestinians are just the oppressed people, and Israel is occupied. Not even Israel, the Zionists. The Zionists are occupying, and they are in fact apartheid, just like South Africa used to be. Bree, thank you for telling the people watching and listening that part of it, because they don't know that part of it, that there was a semi-global, if not global, push in World War II times to get rid of every Jew. That's what
Right.
the story was. And if historically we're going to be honest about it, and you are, Israel arguably 2,600 to 4,000 years ago existed on that land in that place. Islam's only been around since 600 AD. So
Right.
it doesn't make any sense that you can make any sort of Islamic claim to that land knowing the vast history of Israel. It's Bree Dale, sorry. Go to breeadale.com as her website, or breeadale at .substack.com. I got to get those Substack addresses better, Bree. It's always
I
hard
know.
for me
I
to
wish
roll
they
off the
were
tongue.
shorter. Yeah, I wish they
It should
were
be like,
shorter,
go see
Joe.
Bree on Substack, and then
Yeah,
you just go
exactly.
there. Let me ask you about, you mentioned him, Cardinal Pizaballa. I have to know, if this is real, right? He literally said, I will give you my life if you do something for me. What did he do?
So, he wants to, and he's offered Hamas his own person. Now, this, you have to understand the significance of this. It's not just, a Christian leader offering his life. This isn't just words. He is the Latin patriarch of Jerusalem. The first patriarch of Jerusalem was Saint James the Lesser, the apostle, the
Wow.
brother of Saint John.
Mm.
right? So this is how far back this particular see goes. And here this man is who just was made cardinal like 2 weeks ago. And he's been in Israel, he's been in the Holy Land for decades. He understands the situation. In fact, I interviewed him prior to him making that statement. I interviewed him where he reiterated the need for Israel and the Arab nations to come to understanding and living with one another, but saying very much and pushing back on the Vatican and saying it is way too soon to be talking about dialogue, and especially with Hamas, a militant organization that seeks to rape and kill children. He's like, you can't have dialogue with this. And so he pushed back quite a bit
Yeah.
on the Vatican statements. And then to offer himself the next day, he made a statement. He offered himself for the return of the hostages. That placed Hamas's PR spin machine on a tizzy. They didn't know how to respond with it
Right.
because, like to accept that would be a massive international scandal. And to deny that would show that they aren't willing to negotiate at all, and they're hiding behind hostages. So it certainly shows. And he is. I want to make it very clear, very much on the side of the angels. He is pragmatic and he's forthright. He was not parsing words and doing a PR spin. He meant what he
meant
said.
it. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I appreciate you telling the story. Bree Dale, she's coming to us from Rome, Italy. One last question, if you don't mind, and thanks for the time. Let's do this again very
Sure.
soon.
Absolutely.
I need to know, where is the populace of Italy on this? I'm guessing because the Vatican's there and because Israel's the promised land, and the tie of Judaism and Christianity is forever and it's going to continue. I'm guessing they're on Israel's side, but then again, we see shots of people in the streets of Rome that are protesting for Palestine. Where are the people of Italy on this?
Right. We have leftists. We have people on the right. Many on the right are very focused on internal issues and are what you would consider like a nationalist. They love their country. They want their country first. Those on the left, many of them are involved with NGOs. Many of them are involved in communists. Very, very strong communist party here.
Wow.
And they have been involved with the Palestinian student movement here. And in fact, Joe, when they were protesting last Friday in the streets here, they tried to divert from their allotted path, and the Italian police and military pushed back very hard.
Good.
You could see some of those videos. So I want to make it clear, the Italians will broker no violence against women and children.
Yeah,
And if
good.
that happens in Italy, they will be very quick to respond, Joe.
Rome correspondent for the Daily Wire. Go follow her everywhere. Bree A. Dale. It's BreeADail. Also go to her Substack, breeadale.substack.com. Bree, thanks for coming on. I know that it's late at night there. Let's do it again soon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. We can.
All right. We appreciate you. We're back after this. Stay right here.